The morning sun cast long shadows across the ancient stones of Pemberton Palace as William adjusted his work gloves and picked up his metal detector. At 62, he had been the palace's head groundskeeper for over 30 years, and every corner of the sprawling estate held memories. Today felt different, though, charged with an energy he couldn't quite explain. Kate had been gone for 3 months now. 3 months since the car accident that had taken his beloved wife of 40 years. The palace felt emptier without her gentle presence, without her voice calling out to him during his lunch breaks, without her warm smile greeting him at the end of each day. The grief sat heavy in his chest, a constant companion that made even the simplest tasks feel overwhelming. But work was his salvation. The familiar rhythm of maintaining the gardens, checking the old stone walls, and ensuring the palace grounds remained pristine gave him purpose when everything else felt meaningless. The current project was particularly engaging. A restoration of the East Wing's foundation had revealed some irregularities in the ground that needed investigation. William switched on the metal detector and began his methodical sweep of the area behind the kitchen gardens. The device had been helpful in locating old pipes and forgotten foundations over the years. Today, however, as he moved slowly across the manicured lawn, the detector began emitting a strange, persistent beeping unlike anything he'd heard before. He stopped, frowning at the machine. The sound was deeper, more resonant than the usual alerts for metal objects. Moving the detector in a small circle, he pinpointed the source to a patch of ground near an old oak tree that had stood sentinel over the palace for centuries. "That's odd," he murmured to himself, Kate's voice echoing in his memory as she used to tease him about talking to his tools. She would have found this moment fascinating. Kate had always been drawn to mysteries and hidden stories. The beeping intensified as he lowered the detector closer to the ground. William knelt down and began brushing away the fallen leaves and debris. The earth here seemed different, softer somehow, as if it had been disturbed more recently than the surrounding area. Returning to his workshop, William gathered a spade and returned to the spot. As he began to dig carefully, mindful of any potential archaeological significance, his spade struck something solid about 2 feet down. The sound was hollow, metallic, definitely not a pipe or natural stone. His heart began to race as he expanded the hole, working with the precision that decades of groundskeeping had taught him. What emerged was a bronze plate, tarnished with age, but clearly crafted with intention. Strange symbols were etched around its perimeter, and in the center was what appeared to be a keyhole. William sat back on his heels, staring at his discovery. In all his years at Pemberton Palace, he had never heard mention of anything like this. The palace's history stretched back over 400 years, and while he knew there were plenty of secrets buried in its past, this felt different. This felt significant. He thought of Kate, and how excited she would have been. She had always believed that old places held their secrets close, waiting for the right person at the right time to uncover them. "Everything happens for a reason, William," she used to say. "We just don't always see the reason right away." As the afternoon wore on, William found himself unable to concentrate on his other duties. The bronze plate haunted his thoughts. Who had buried it, and why? What was it meant to protect or conceal? The symbols around the edge looked vaguely familiar, similar to some of the carved decorations he'd seen in the oldest parts of the palace. That evening, William found himself in the palace library, a privilege granted to him by the current Lord Pemberton, who had always appreciated William's dedication to the estate. The library contained centuries of documents, maps, and records related to the palace and its grounds. He pulled out several old architectural plans and historical documents, spreading them across one of the heavy wooden tables. By lamplight, he studied the layouts and descriptions, looking for any reference to underground chambers or hidden spaces. It was in a leather-bound journal from 1847 that he found the first clue. The journal belonged to Edmund Pemberton, the 5th Lord of the estate, and contained detailed notes about renovations and discoveries made during his time. One entry, dated September 15th, 1847, caught William's attention. The workmen have reported strange echoes in the foundation stones beneath the east wing. When questioned, the elder craftsman spoke of old stories, tales of chambers built by the first Lord Pemberton during troubled times. I have instructed them to seal any openings they discover. Some secrets are best left buried. William's pulse quickened. The east wing, that was exactly where he'd found the bronze plate. He read on, but Edmund's subsequent entries made no further mention of the discovery. Whatever had been found had apparently been sealed away and forgotten. Over the following days, William found himself returning to the spot repeatedly. He had carefully covered the bronze plate with soil again, not wanting to draw attention until he better understood what he'd found. But the mystery consumed his thoughts. He began noticing other oddities around the palace grounds. Certain areas where his metal detector picked up unusual readings. Stones in the foundation walls that seemed slightly different from their neighbors. Small inconsistencies that he'd previously attributed to centuries of repairs and renovations, but which now seemed potentially significant. The breakthrough came on a Thursday morning while he was trimming hedges near the main entrance. A tour group was passing through, led by Mrs. Henderson, the palace's official historian. William had known her for years, and she was explaining the palace's construction to the visitors. The original Lord Pemberton was quite paranoid about security, she was saying. This was during a time of great political upheaval, and wealthy landowners often built hidden passages and secret chambers as protection against potential threats. While we've never found direct evidence of such features at Pemberton Palace, family letters suggest they may have existed. After the tour group moved on, William approached Mrs. Henderson. "Margaret," he said, "you mentioned secret chambers. Do you have any specific information about them?" Mrs. Henderson adjusted her glasses and smiled. "Oh, William, you've been listening to the tours again. It's mostly speculation based on family correspondence. Why do you ask?" William hesitated. He trusted Margaret, but he also knew that any significant discovery would need to be reported to the authorities and could potentially disrupt his quiet work environment. "Just curious," he said finally. "I've been working on the East Wing foundations, and some of the stonework seems different." "The East Wing is the oldest part of the structure," Margaret explained. "It's possible there are architectural features we haven't identified. The first Lord Pemberton was known to be quite secretive about his construction plans. If you notice anything unusual, you should certainly let me know." That night, William made a decision. He would return to the bronze plate and see if he could learn more about it. If it truly was a keyhole, there had to be a key somewhere. And if there was a key, there had to be something worth protecting. He waited until well after dark, when the palace was empty except for the night security guard who rarely ventured onto the grounds. Armed with a powerful flashlight and his tools, William made his way back to the oak tree. The bronze plate gleamed in the flashlight beam as he carefully excavated it once again. Up close, under better light, he could see that the symbols around the edge were indeed similar to decorative elements found throughout the palace. They appeared to be a mix of family crests and what might have been coded messages. As he studied the central keyhole, William noticed something else. The bronze plate wasn't sitting directly on the earth. There was a gap beneath it, as if it covered an opening. Using a thin probe, he determined that there was indeed a hollow space below. His hands trembling with excitement and nervousness, William carefully worked to lift the bronze plate. It was heavier than expected, requiring considerable effort to shift. As it moved aside, a draft of cool, stale air rose from the opening beneath. What he revealed was a stone-lined shaft, perhaps 3 feet square, descending into darkness. Iron rungs had been set into one wall, creating a crude ladder leading down into the unknown depths beneath Pemberton Palace. William sat back, his mind reeling. He had found what appeared to be a secret entrance to underground chambers that had been sealed for over a century and a half. The magnitude of the discovery was overwhelming. As he pondered his next move, a strange sound drifted up from the shaft. It was faint, almost inaudible, but unmistakably there. The whisper of air moving through distant spaces, carrying with it the suggestion of vast chambers hidden beneath the palace grounds. And then, so softly he almost dismissed it as imagination, he heard something that made his blood freeze. It sounded like a voice, distant, echoing, and heartbreakingly familiar. It sounded like Kate calling his name. William gripped the edge of the opening, his rational mind telling him it was impossible, while his heart yearned to believe. Kate was gone, had been gone for months. But the voice came again, clearer this time, echoing up from the depths with a clarity that couldn't be explained by acoustics alone. William, William, come find me. Tears blurred his vision as he stared into the darkness below. Whether it was grief playing tricks on his mind, some strange acoustic phenomenon, or something beyond his understanding, William knew he had to descend into that shaft. He had to discover what secrets lay buried beneath Pemberton Palace, and he had to find the source of that impossible voice that sounded so much like his beloved Kate. The morning sun was beginning to rise as William made his preparations. Tomorrow, he would take leave from his regular duties and venture into the hidden depths beneath the palace. Whatever he found down there, whether answers, artifacts, or simply the echo of his own grief, he knew his life was about to change forever. The secret entrance waited patiently under its bronze cover, just as it had waited for over a century. And somewhere in the darkness below, Kate's voice seemed to call his name again, drawing him toward a destiny he could never have imagined. William barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard Kate's voice echoing from the depths below the palace. By morning, he had convinced himself it must have been the wind, or perhaps some acoustic trick caused by the underground chambers. Yet, deep in his heart, he couldn't shake the feeling that something extraordinary was waiting for him in those hidden depths. He arrived at work earlier than usual, his stomach tight with anticipation and anxiety. The familiar routine of checking the greenhouse and reviewing his daily tasks felt surreal, as if he were performing the actions of his old life while standing on the threshold of something completely new. Lord Pemberton was away on business in London, and most of the staff wouldn't arrive for another hour. This gave William the perfect opportunity to gather the equipment he would need for his descent. From the maintenance shed, he collected a sturdy rope, a more powerful flashlight, extra batteries, and his grandfather's old mining helmet that he'd kept as a memento. As he prepared, William found himself thinking about Kate and how she had always encouraged his curiosity. She had been the one to suggest he apply for the groundskeeper position at Pemberton Palace 40 years ago, recognizing that his love of history and gardens would find perfect expression in caring for such an ancient estate. "You have gentle hands, William," she used to say, watching him tend to delicate seedlings or repair old stone walls. "You understand that old things need patience and respect." Now, as he prepared to explore chambers that hadn't seen light for decades, he hoped those same qualities would serve him well. The walk across the grounds to the oak tree felt both endless and far too short. Each step brought him closer to either the greatest discovery of his life or a dangerous mistake that could cost him everything. The bronze plate lay where he had left it, covered by a thin layer of soil and fallen leaves that made it appear untouched. William carefully removed the covering and looked down into the shaft. In the bright morning light, he could see that the ladder descended about 20 feet before disappearing into a horizontal passage. The stone walls were expertly carved, suggesting that whoever had built this had possessed considerable skill and resources. Before beginning his descent, William tied one end of his rope securely to the oak tree. If anything happened to the iron ladder, he would have an alternative means of escape. He tested his flashlight, checked the fit of his grandfather's helmet, and took a deep breath of fresh morning air. The first few rungs of the iron ladder felt solid beneath his feet, though they creaked ominously under his weight. As he descended, the temperature dropped noticeably, and the air grew heavy with the scent of stone and earth. 20 feet down, his boots touched solid ground, and he found himself standing in a narrow corridor carved from the living rock. The passage was just wide enough for a man to walk comfortably, with an arched ceiling that spoke of medieval craftsmanship. William's flashlight beam revealed that the walls bore the same symbols he had seen on the bronze plate, along with what appeared to be family crests and dates carved into the stone. He moved forward slowly, his footsteps echoing in the confined space. The corridor ran straight for about 50 feet before branching into multiple passages. At this junction, William discovered something that made his heart race. Carved into the stone wall was a message in English, though the script was archaic and difficult to read. Should ye who enter these chambers possess righteous heart and noble purpose, the secrets of our house shall be revealed. Should ye enter with ill intent, may these stones be thy tomb. William shivered, but not from the cold. The weight of history seemed to press down upon him in this hidden place. He was walking in footsteps laid down centuries ago by people whose lives and fears had driven them to create this elaborate underground network. Choosing the leftmost passage, William continued deeper into the hidden complex. This corridor was wider than the entrance tunnel, and soon his flashlight revealed the first chamber, a circular room about 20 feet in diameter with alcoves carved into the walls. Each alcove contained artifacts that made William gasp in wonder. There were ancient books wrapped in oiled cloth, ornate weapons that gleamed despite their age, and jewelry that sparkled in his flashlight beam. But it was the paintings that truly took his breath away, portraits of the Pemberton family dating back centuries, preserved in the stable underground environment. In one alcove, William discovered what appeared to be a family chronicle, a leather-bound book filled with handwritten accounts of births, deaths, marriages, and significant events. As he carefully opened it, a loose page fell out, covered in the same archaic script he had seen on the wall. By the light of his flashlight, William made out enough of the text to understand its significance. It was a confession of sorts, written by the First Lord Pemberton, admitting to his support of a failed rebellion against the crown. The hidden chambers had been built as a refuge where the family could hide their most precious possessions if their political activities were discovered. "We are loyal to our conscience above our king," the text read. "If these words are discovered, may God have mercy on our souls and preserve our legacy for future generations who might understand our cause." William carefully returned the page to the book, his hands trembling slightly. He was holding evidence of treason that could have cost the entire family their lives centuries ago. The trust placed in these hidden chambers was enormous, and he felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Moving deeper into the chamber complex, William discovered room after room filled with treasures and secrets. There was a library containing books that had probably been banned or burned in the world above, a workshop with tools and half-finished projects abandoned centuries ago, and a chapel where the family had apparently worshipped in private. But it was in the deepest chamber that William made the discovery that would change everything. This room was different from the others, more personal, more intimate. It contained furniture that suggested it had been used as living quarters, a bed, a desk, and personal belongings that spoke of someone who had spent considerable time in these underground spaces. On the desk, William found a journal that was much more recent than the other documents he had encountered. The handwriting was feminine and elegant, and as he read the first entries, his blood turned to ice. The journal belonged to Catherine Pemberton, wife of the 7th Lord, and it was dated from 1923, less than a century ago. According to her entries, Catherine had discovered the hidden chambers while exploring the palace during her husband's frequent absences. But what she found there was not just historical artifacts. "I hear her voice again today," one entry read. "Sarah calls to me from the deepest chamber, where she has waited these many years. She tells me of the sadness that binds her to this place, of the love that was stolen from her too soon." William's hands shook as he read entry after entry describing Catherine's conversations with the spirit of a woman named Sarah, who had apparently died in these chambers centuries earlier. According to the journal, Sarah had been the First Lord's daughter, who had hidden in the chambers during a government raid, but had become trapped when the entrance was sealed. She is not angry, Catherine wrote. She is lonely. She waits for someone who will understand her sorrow, someone who has loved and lost as she has. She tells me that one day such a person will come, and she will finally be free to rest. As William read these words, he heard it again, Kate's voice, soft and distant, calling his name. This time, however, he understood that it wasn't Kate at all. It was Sarah, reaching across the centuries, speaking to his grief-stricken heart in the only way she knew how. He followed the sound deeper into the chamber complex, through passages that seemed to stretch endlessly into the earth. The walls here were older, more roughly hewn, as if they represented the very first excavations made by desperate people hiding from forces beyond their control. Finally, William emerged into a vast natural cavern that had been incorporated into the man-made complex. Stalactites hung from the ceiling like frozen tears, and in the center of the space stood a simple stone tomb. The tomb was unadorned except for a single inscription, Sarah Pemberton, beloved daughter, may she find peace. Fresh flowers lay atop the stone, roses that could not possibly have grown in this underground darkness, yet appeared as vibrant and alive as if they had just been picked. As William approached the tomb, the voice came again, clearer than ever before. But now he could see the truth. It wasn't Kate's voice he was hearing, but something far older and more mysterious. The voice of a woman who had waited centuries for someone who would understand her sorrow and, perhaps, finally, help her find rest. You have loved deeply, the voice whispered, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. You understand the pain of loss, the weight of memories that refuse to fade. Help me, William. Help me find the peace I have sought for so very long. William knelt beside the tomb, tears streaming down his cheeks. He understood now why he had been drawn to this place, why he had been the one to find the hidden entrance. His grief over Kate's loss had created a connection with this ancient sorrow, a bridge across time that had called him down into the darkness. As he placed his hand on the cold stone, William felt a warmth spread through his fingers. The chamber filled with a soft light that had no visible source, and in that light he saw her, Sarah Pemberton, as real as life, standing beside her own tomb. She was young, perhaps 25, with kind eyes that held centuries of sadness. She wore a simple dress from a bygone era, and her dark hair fell in gentle waves around her shoulders. When she smiled at William, it was with gratitude and understanding that transcended time itself. "Thank you," she said, her voice now clear and present. "Thank you for hearing me, for coming to me when all others have forgotten. I have a gift for you, William Hartwell. Your Kate waits for you, but not yet. You have work to do in the world above. But when your time comes, she will be there, and so will I, and all the love you have given will return to you tenfold." The light grew brighter, and William felt a peace settling over him that he hadn't experienced since Kate's death. He understood that he was witnessing something beyond ordinary reality, a moment of grace that few people are privileged to experience. As the light faded and Sarah's image became translucent, she spoke one final time. "Tell my story, William. Let the world above know that love never truly dies, that it waits patiently for those who remember, and that sometimes the greatest treasures are not gold or jewels, but the connections we make across time and space." William remained kneeling beside the tomb long after Sarah had vanished, processing what he had experienced. When he finally rose and made his way back through the chambers, he carried with him not just the knowledge of the Pemberton family's secrets, but a renewed sense of purpose and hope. The climb back to the surface felt like emerging from a dream. William's legs trembled as he ascended the iron ladder, his mind struggling to process what he had experienced in the depths below. The morning sun, which had seemed so ordinary when he descended, now felt like a blessing as it touched his face. As he carefully replaced the bronze cover and restored the ground to its original appearance, William realized that his life had been fundamentally changed. The encounter with Sarah's spirit had not only revealed the hidden history of Pemberton Palace, but had also given him a sense of purpose he hadn't felt since Kate's death. Over the following days, William threw himself into research with an energy that surprised him. He spent his evenings in the palace library, cross-referencing the dates and names he had found in the underground chambers with the official historical records. What emerged was a fascinating story of a family caught between loyalty to their conscience and loyalty to their king. The first Lord Pemberton, he discovered, had indeed been involved in a rebellion against the crown in the early 1600s. While the official family history portrayed him as a loyal subject, the documents in the hidden chambers revealed a different truth. He had been part of a network of nobles who had opposed certain policies of King James I, particularly those related to religious freedom. When the rebellion failed, and many of its leaders were executed, Lord Pemberton had managed to escape punishment by destroying evidence of his involvement and creating the underground chambers to hide his most compromising documents and possessions. Sarah, his beloved daughter, had helped him in this effort, but had paid the ultimate price when government agents had arrived to search the palace. According to the hidden records, Sarah had volunteered to hide in the chambers during the search, taking with her some of the most incriminating evidence. However, the entrance had been sealed prematurely when the agents had arrived earlier than expected. By the time it was safe to reopen the chambers, Sarah had died from lack of air and exposure to the cold underground environment. The family had buried her there, in the deepest chamber, and had sealed the entrance permanently, believing that disturbing her rest would only compound the tragedy. Over the centuries, knowledge of the chamber's existence had faded, surviving only in fragments of family correspondence and whispered legends among the staff. But Sarah's spirit had remained, bound to the place where she had died, unable to find peace because her story had been forgotten and her sacrifice had gone unrecorded. The journal entries from Catherine Pemberton in 1923 suggested that Sarah had tried to communicate with others over the years, but Catherine had been the only one sensitive enough to hear her clearly, until William's grief had created a similar opening. As William pieced together this history, he began to understand the true magnitude of what he had discovered. The underground chambers contained not just valuable artifacts, but the lost history of a family's struggle with conscience and loyalty. More importantly, they contained the story of a young woman whose love for her family had led her to make the ultimate sacrifice. The question now was what to do with this knowledge. William knew that proper authorities should be informed about the archaeological and historical significance of the chambers. The artifacts alone were probably worth a fortune and certainly belonged in museums where they could be studied and appreciated. But he also felt a deep responsibility to honor Sarah's request to tell her story. His first step was to approach Margaret Henderson, the palace historian. On a quiet Tuesday afternoon, he found her cataloging new acquisitions in the library and asked if they could speak privately. "Margaret," he began carefully, "I've discovered something on the grounds that I think you need to see. Something that could significantly change our understanding of the palace's history." Margaret looked up from her work with interest. "Oh, what sort of discovery, William? I'd rather show you than try to explain it. Would you be willing to come with me tomorrow morning? Early, before the tours begin?" The curiosity in Margaret's eyes told William that she would agree. They arranged to meet at dawn the following day, near the oak tree where William's journey had begun. That evening, William called his daughter Emma, who lived in London with her family. He hadn't spoken to her much since Kate's funeral, partly because his grief had made him withdraw from everyone, and partly because he hadn't known what to say. Now, however, he felt a need to reconnect with the family he still had. "Dad," Emma's voice carried surprise and concern when she answered. "Is everything all right? You sound different." "I'm fine, love," William said, and for the first time in months, he meant it. "Better than I've been in a while, actually. I wanted to hear your voice and to tell you that I'm starting to heal. Your mother would want that for me." They talked for over an hour, with William sharing stories about Kate that made them both laugh and cry. He didn't mention his discovery. That would come later when he better understood what needed to be done. For now, it was enough to reconnect with his daughter and begin rebuilding the relationships that grief had temporarily severed. The next morning, Margaret arrived promptly at dawn, equipped with professional archaeological tools and documentation equipment. William had prepared carefully for this moment, gathering copies of the historical documents he had found and organizing his thoughts about how to present his discovery. "This is quite mysterious, William," Margaret said as they walked across the dew-covered grass. "You've piqued my curiosity considerably." When they reached the oak tree, William knelt down and began removing the camouflaged bronze plate. Margaret's gasp when the metal surface was revealed told him everything he needed to know about the significance of his find. "My God," she breathed, kneeling beside him to examine the symbols carved around the edge. "These markings, they're definitely from the Pemberton family crest, but there are additional elements I've never seen before." "William, where exactly did you find this?" "About 2 feet down," William replied. "And, Margaret, there's more. Much more." He led her through his discovery step by step, explaining about the metal detector readings, the excavation, and the shaft that led to the underground chambers. Margaret's excitement grew with each detail, and when William mentioned the historical documents he had found, she could barely contain herself. "We need to document everything," she said urgently. "This could be the most significant historical discovery in the region in decades. But, William, we also need to proceed very carefully. There are legal protocols for archaeological finds, especially on a historic estate like this one." They spent the morning planning their approach. Margaret would contact the appropriate authorities and begin the process of officially documenting the discovery. William would continue to guard the site and assist with the initial exploration. Most importantly, they would work together to ensure that Sarah's story was properly told and honored. Over the following weeks, the hidden chambers became the focus of intense, but carefully controlled activity. Archaeological teams from the university arrived to document and preserve the artifacts. Historians pored over the documents, piecing together the true story of the Pemberton family's involvement in the early 17th century rebellions. The discovery made national news, with headlines like "Hidden History Uncovered" and "Palace Groundskeeper's Amazing Find." William found himself thrust into an unfamiliar spotlight, giving interviews to reporters and historians who were fascinated by his story. But it was his conversation with Dr. Elizabeth Winters, a specialist in historical folklore and supernatural experiences, that proved most meaningful. Dr. Winters had studied cases where grief and emotional sensitivity had apparently enabled communication with spirits tied to specific locations. "What you described is not uncommon in locations where strong emotions have left their mark," she explained during their meeting in the palace library. "Places where people have died with unfinished business, particularly those who died protecting others or maintaining family honor. Your recent loss and the depth of your grief may have made you more receptive to Sarah's attempts to communicate." "Do you think she's found peace now?" William asked. "I haven't heard her voice since that day in the chamber." Dr. Winters smiled gently. "The fact that her story is being told, that her sacrifice is finally being recognized and honored. Yes, I believe she has found the peace she was seeking. Sometimes that's all a restless spirit needs: acknowledgement, understanding, and the assurance that their story won't be forgotten." As the weeks passed and the archaeological work continued, William found himself changing in ways he hadn't expected. The experience in the chambers had not only connected him to Sarah's story, but had also helped him process his own grief in a healthier way. Kate's death would always be a source of sorrow, but it no longer felt like an ending. Instead, it felt like a transition, one part of a larger story that continued beyond physical death. He began visiting Kate's grave regularly again, something he hadn't been able to do since the funeral. Now, however, he went not just to mourn, but to share his discoveries and his growing understanding that love truly did transcend death. "You would have loved this mystery," he would say to Kate's headstone. "You always said that old places held their secrets close. You were right about that, love. You were right about so many things." The archaeological work revealed treasures beyond imagination. The underground library contained first editions of books that had been thought lost forever. The family records filled in gaps in historical knowledge about the early Stuart period and the religious and political conflicts of that era. But perhaps the most significant discovery was a sealed chamber that the original archaeological team had missed. When it was finally opened, it revealed Sarah's personal belongings, her diary, her artwork, and letters she had written to a young man she had been planning to marry before her death. These personal items revealed Sarah not just as a historical figure, but as a real young woman with hopes, dreams, and fears. Her diary entries showed her growing awareness of her family's dangerous political situation and her determination to help protect them, even at the cost of her own safety. Reading Sarah's own words about her decision to hide in the chambers brought William to tears. Her final entry, written while she waited in the darkness, expressed not regret or fear, but gratitude for the opportunity to protect her family and hope that her story would someday be understood. "I am not afraid," she had written. "If this is to be my end, let it be known that I chose it willingly out of love for my father and loyalty to our cause. Perhaps someday someone will understand what we fought for and why it mattered. Until then, I will wait." As William read these words aloud at the press conference announcing the discovery of Sarah's personal effects, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Sarah's story had become more than historical curiosity. It had become a testament to the power of love and sacrifice that resonated across the centuries. Lord Pemberton, who had returned from London to oversee the archaeological work, announced that a portion of the underground chambers would be preserved as a memorial to Sarah and open to the public as an educational exhibit. Sarah's tomb would remain undisturbed, but her story would finally be told to the world. 6 months after William's extraordinary discovery, Pemberton Palace had been transformed. The underground chambers, now known as Sarah's Sanctuary, had become one of the most visited historical sites in the region. Visitors came from around the world to see the preserved medieval chambers and learn about the remarkable story of sacrifice and love that had been hidden beneath the earth for centuries. William found himself in an unexpected new role. Lord Pemberton had asked him to serve as the official guide for the chambers, recognizing that no one else could tell Sarah's story with the same passion and authenticity. It was a responsibility that William embraced wholeheartedly, feeling that it honored both Sarah's memory and his promise to her. Each day, as he led groups of visitors through the carefully preserved chambers, William would begin with Sarah's story. He would explain how a young woman's love for her family had led her to make the ultimate sacrifice, and how her spirit had waited centuries for someone who would understand her sorrow and help her find peace. The tours always ended at the memorial chamber, where Sarah's personal effects were displayed in climate-controlled cases. Visitors would file past her diary, her artwork, and the letters to her lost love, many of them moved to tears by the intimate glimpse into a life cut tragically short. But for William, the most meaningful part of each tour came at the very end, when he would stand before Sarah's tomb and share what he had learned about love, loss, and the connections that bind us across time. "Sarah taught me that love doesn't end with death," he would say to the hush groups. "It transforms, it transcends, and it waits patiently for those who remember. My wife Kate always said that everything happens for a reason, even if we don't see the reason right away." I understand now what she meant. The success of the Sarah Sanctuary exhibit had brought unexpected prosperity to the area. Local businesses thrived as tourists flocked to experience the underground chambers and learn about the hidden history of Pemberton Palace. The discovery had also led to additional archaeological investigations that revealed more secrets about the palace's past. For William personally, the changes had been profound. His grief over Kate's death had not disappeared, but it had transformed into something more manageable. He understood now that grief was not something to be overcome, but something to be carried with grace, like a precious burden that connected him to the love he had lost. His relationship with his daughter Emma had grown stronger as well. She visited frequently now, often bringing her children to see their grandfather's remarkable discovery. Young Tommy, his 8-year-old grandson, was particularly fascinated by the story and had announced his intention to become an archaeologist. "Grandpa William," Tommy said during one visit, "do you think Sarah is really gone now? Or is she still here sometimes?" William knelt down to meet the boy's earnest gaze. "I think she's at peace now, Tommy. Her story has been told, and people remember her. That's all she wanted, to be remembered for the love she showed and the choice she made." But even as he spoke these words, William sometimes wondered if Sarah's presence had truly departed. There were moments, particularly when he was alone in the chambers at the end of the day, when he felt a warmth in the air that seemed to suggest gratitude and contentment. Whether it was his imagination, the lingering effects of the emotional experience, or something more, he chose to interpret it as a sign that his effort had indeed helped Sarah find the peace she had sought. Dr. Elizabeth Winters had become a frequent visitor to the palace, continuing her research into the connections between grief and supernatural experiences. Her work with William and the Sarah's Sanctuary discovery had provided valuable insights into how places could hold emotional imprints across time. "What you experienced, William," she explained during one of their conversations, "represents a perfect convergence of factors. Your deep grief created an emotional openness. The chambers held the imprint of Sarah's powerful emotions at the time of her death, and your discovery provided the opportunity for resolution. It's quite remarkable, really. Do you think it will happen again?" William asked. "Will others have similar experiences?" Dr. Winters considered carefully before responding. "The conditions that created your experience were unique. But I do think that Sarah's story, now that it's been told and honored, has the power to touch people in profound ways. Perhaps not through direct spiritual contact, but through the emotional connection that comes from understanding another person's sacrifice and love." Indeed, the letters and emails that poured into the palace from visitors seemed to confirm Dr. Winters' theory. People from around the world shared how Sarah's story had touched their own experiences with loss and helped them find meaning in their grief. One particularly moving letter came from a woman named Maria, who had lost her teenage daughter in an accident. "Reading about Sarah's choice to sacrifice herself for love of her family helped me understand that my daughter's brief life had meaning and purpose," she wrote. "Sometimes the greatest acts of love are the ones that go unrecognized for years, but they matter just the same." William carefully preserved these letters, feeling that they were testament to Sarah's continuing influence on the world. Her story had become more than historical curiosity. It had become a source of comfort and inspiration for others facing their own experiences with loss and grief. As autumn arrived, marking a full year since Kate's death, William found himself preparing for what he expected to be a difficult anniversary. He had arranged to take time off from his guide duties, planning to spend the day quietly remembering his wife and reflecting on the journey that had brought him to this point. The morning of the anniversary dawned crisp and clear. William walked through the palace gardens, noting the changes that the seasons had brought. New growth had emerged where old plants had died back, a natural cycle of renewal that seemed to mirror his own emotional journey. He visited Kate's grave first, bringing her favorite flowers and spending time talking to her about the discoveries and changes of the past year. As he knelt beside her headstone, he felt a profound sense of gratitude for the time they had shared together and for the way her memory continued to guide and comfort him. "I miss you every day," he said aloud. "But I understand now that missing you is just another way of loving you. And I've learned that love doesn't have to end with goodbye." From the cemetery, William walked to the oak tree where his adventure had begun. The bronze plate had been replaced with a proper marker indicating the entrance to Sarah's sanctuary, but the tree remained unchanged its ancient branches reaching toward the sky like arms in prayer. As he stood beneath the oak's canopy, William reflected on the year that had passed. He had begun it as a man consumed by grief, unable to see beyond his loss. Now, while the grief remained, it was balanced by purpose, connection, and a deeper understanding of the mysteries that surrounded him. "Thank you," he said softly, not sure if he was speaking to Kate, to Sarah, or to the forces of the universe that had brought him to this moment of understanding. The afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. Emma arrived with her family, having driven down from London to spend the anniversary with her father. They had dinner together in William's cottage, sharing memories of Kate and stories about the changes the past year had brought. "You seem different, Dad," Emma observed as they sat together after dinner. "Stronger somehow, but also more at peace." William smiled, thinking about how to explain the transformation he had experienced. "I think I've learned that love is stronger than loss," he said finally. "Your mother's love didn't die with her, and the love I have for her doesn't have to be a source of pain. It could be a source of strength." That evening, as his family prepared to return to London, Tommy approached his grandfather with a serious expression that children sometimes wear when they're about to say something important. "Grandpa William," he said, "I think Grandma Kate would be proud of what you did for Sarah. You helped her find peace, just like you're helping other people when you tell her story." The simple wisdom of his grandson's words moved William deeply. Out of the mouths of babes, he thought, remembering one of Kate's favorite expressions. Children often saw truths that adults missed, connections that seemed obvious once they were pointed out. As the months continued to pass, William settled into his new life with increasing contentment. His work as a guide brought him into contact with people from all walks of life, each bringing their own stories and perspectives to Sarah's tale. Some visitors came for the historical significance, others for the archaeological wonder, but many came seeking the kind of comfort and understanding that William had found in his own journey. He began writing a book about the discovery, working with Margaret Henderson and other historians to ensure accuracy while also capturing the emotional and spiritual dimensions of the experience. The book would tell not only Sarah's story, but also his own journey from grief to understanding, showing how an ancient tragedy had helped heal a modern heartbreak. The writing process proved therapeutic, allowing William to organize his thoughts and feelings about the past year. As he wrote about his first encounter with Sarah's voice and his descent into the chambers, he was struck by how much he had changed since that moment. "I was looking for something to fill the emptiness Kate's death had left behind," he wrote in one chapter. "What I found instead was understanding that the emptiness itself was precious. It was the shape of the love we had shared, and filling it would have meant losing that connection. Sarah taught me that some spaces are meant to be honored, not filled." The book's publication was still months away, but advanced interest from publishers suggested that Sarah's story would reach an even wider audience. William hoped that sharing their intertwined tales might help others who were struggling with loss to find their own path to healing and understanding. As winter approached, marking the beginning of William's second year since Kate's death, he found himself reflecting on how much his life had changed. The grief remained, but it had become a gentle companion rather than an overwhelming force. His work at the palace provided purpose and connection, and his relationship with his family had deepened through shared understanding of love's enduring power. Standing once again beneath the oak tree on a crisp December morning, William looked up at the branches that had sheltered the entrance to Sarah's chambers for so many years. The tree had kept its secret faithfully, waiting for the right moment and the right person to reveal what lay hidden beneath its roots. "Thank you," he said again, and this time he knew exactly who he was thanking. Kate, for loving him enough to let him go. Sarah, for trusting him with her story. The mysterious forces that had brought them all together across time and circumstance. And, perhaps most importantly, himself, for having the courage to descend into the darkness and discover the light that waited there. As he walked back toward the palace, William felt Kate's presence more clearly than he had since her death, not as a voice or a vision, but as a warm certainty that love truly was eternal, that their story was not ended but transformed, and that the best way to honor the dead was to live fully and love deeply while there was still time. The chambers beneath Pemberton Palace continued to welcome visitors. Sarah's story continued to provide comfort to the grieving, and William continued to find new meaning in each day. Love had indeed proved stronger than loss, and from the depths of grief had emerged a more profound understanding of life's deepest truths. In the end, William realized everyone was searching for the same thing Sarah had been seeking in those dark chambers beneath the earth: recognition, understanding, and the assurance that their love would not be forgotten. The greatest gift he could give to Sarah, to Kate's memory, and to himself was to live in a way that honored that search and helped others find their own paths to peace.